It's my distinct pleasure tonight to introduce you to our guest expert. Her name is Dr. Jacqui Fleury, and she runs a practice called True Potential. So you can find her online. Dr. Jacqui, ND, is the clinic founder, and she has spent over 25 years empowering women to navigate their challenges of perimenopause and menopause. As a naturopathic doctor, speaker, author, product visionary, and advocate for women's health, she goes beyond attributing changes to just hormones, uncovering the deeper root causes of these shifts. Her approach, grounded in the gut-brain connection, offers clarity and relief for midlife women, especially those at the height of their careers, who find sudden changes in body and mind overwhelming. Dr. Jacqui bridges the gap between scientific discoveries and practical solutions, helping women enhance sleep, mood, digestion, body composition, and hormone balance for happier and healthier, more productive lives. Through her books, products, consultations, and corporate trainings, Dr. Fleury provides a comprehensive framework of sustainable lifestyle upgrades that make a difference. Her mission is simple: reignite hope for women in midlife, guiding them to feel more like themselves than they ever have before. Dr. Jacqui, it's such an honor to know you and to have you on board. Thank you for joining our Medical Thursday.
Great to be here, Stuart. Thank you.
So I also wanted to celebrate and congratulate you on your new book. Thank you. Congratulations. I mean, it looks really great. Master Your Moods for Menopause and Perimenopause. It's not about your hormones. A practical guide to feel more like yourself. So I want to strongly encourage everybody to run out to Amazon and get a copy of Dr. Jacqui's book. The questions that people have for the practitioners, it's pretty straightforward. The other doctors have asked, please let us hear from the clinicians that are part of Zinzino to tell us, please, your story. How did you first hear about Zinzino? And how did you get comfortable with Zinzino? And then finally, how did you integrate it into your practice? And then the last question will be, what kind of results have you seen with the Zinzino products? So why don't we start with, how did you get introduced to Zinzino and how did you get comfortable with the program?
Well, it's a funny story, Stuart, because it all started on a road trip in Saskatchewan where there was nothing but me and the prairies and the big blue sky, and I was driving and I called up a dear friend of mine, Nancy Pellegrini, who many of you may know, and I just wanted to chat. I just needed to, stay awake on the road, and so we got chatting, and I was in the middle of finishing up this book that I was writing. So we were talking and I was mentioning to her, some of the questions that were coming up for me and some of the research I was doing around the topics in the book. And I had mentioned to her something about omegas. I was writing the chapter on supplements, and she said, oh my gosh, I literally have to patch you in. I'm just on a call with this guy by the name of Stuart. Would you be willing to say hi to him? So I said, of course. So she connected us. We did a three-way call. And Stuart, you were the one person who could answer every single question I had around the use of omega-3, some of the studies that were coming out, some of the maybe controversial findings that people were reporting on, to the point where I was having patients come to me and say, like, I don't think I'm comfortable taking omegas. There seems to be some debate about whether or not they're actually safe. And so it was a really timely question that I had been asked, and so it sent me down this rabbit hole of research around what was the real story about omega-3s. So lo and behold, there you were on the phone, I'm driving, and by the time you answered every one of my questions about the omega-3s, I literally pulled over and I whipped out my credit card and I said, how do I get my hands on some of this oil? Because I want to take it, I want my kids on it, I want to take a test, and then I'll figure everything else out after the fact. So it was really so much about what you shared with me answered so many of the observations and the questions that I've had for years of clinical practice using omega-3s and observing things like, you know, fish oil that tends to smell after about 20 or 30 days in the fridge. I used to say to my patients, once you open that bottle, you literally have 3 or 4 weeks to get that oil done. If it's not done, you're going to have to throw it out. Or consistently patients, you know, maybe burping up fish oil capsules, and me having been advised by some of my distributors saying, well, have them freeze the capsules and they'll break down further down in their digestive tracts. And so I don't know, that didn't sit 100% right with me, but I just thought this is as good as it gets. This is part of taking a fish oil supplement. So when you described the balance oil to me, when you talked about the research, when you talked about all the really highly educated medical professionals and researchers who were either, you know, part of the advisory team with Zinzino, or who were really adopting Zinzino into their practices or into their professions really early on, I thought, I think this is all I really need to hear. So I signed up right there on the side of the road. And then I went into the office on Monday and I said to my administrative assistant, I said, guess what? We have some new processes that there's going to be a big shipment that arrives and we're going to have to figure this out as we go. So that was how it all started.
So had you been testing omega-3 levels prior to working with Zinzino?
I had done it sporadically with another company, a very reputable company in the US, and I would do it very, very haphazardly because it really didn't, in my opinion, there was no point in testing. I don't do any lab tests if it's not going to change my recommendations or the way I do things. So I really had never made that specific correlation and that connection that, you know, I hadn't tested enough people to develop enough of a pattern that everybody was going to be out of balance. So yes, it was a real eye opener for me. And then when you told me that, you know, to date, 97% of the people who'd been tested were out of balance. And of course, you know, you and I have joked about how, you know, I was so self-assured that my patients were going to all pass the test because we were all taking oils, myself included, my kids, everybody were on fish oils. So you very kindly said to me, well, that might be so, but you know, let's watch and wait. And sure enough, after testing 100 people, I reproduced the world statistics in my clinic. 97% were out of balance.
So you went from driving along the side of the road, hearing this new idea, there's a book chapter that has to be written. It's sort of
yeah.
perfect timing. But then what did it look like when you started to integrate Zinzino into the clinic? A lot of clinicians, they ask that question. Great, I get the science, but what
Mhm.
did the practical brass tacks look like implementing it into your practice?
Well, from my perspective as a clinician, it was really easy to talk to my patients because I have patients that have been seeing me for many years. So it was really easy to like bring them back into the fold and say, I've just learned some new information about something that you've been taking for a long time. And I really want to find out if what we're doing is working. So people really were easy to adopt. Like they signed up. They were quite happy. They loved that this was a protocol, that there was, you know, it was an opportunity to let them know whether or not it was working. They were going to do this protocol for 120 days. They were going to be able to retest at no charge to them. And because I'm a pretty systems oriented person, we very early on developed a system where we would do a lot of the work for our patient. So we would register the kit on their behalf. We would also keep a copy of their ID, their test ID, so that if they accidentally lost their test ID, that we would be able to, you know, help them get their results. And then I kept a copy of their results in very much the same way any other lab tests are charted and cataloged for them. So we developed a process very early in, and that really took a lot of the friction away from the patient actually being able to do this. So, and even to this point, any questions they have, they know to just call us. We don't expect them to call customer service themselves. So we've just really worked it into our full service deliverables just in the way that we do everything else for our patients, and they seem to really, really appreciate that.
So do I understand you correctly? You said you've now tested over 100 people in the clinic so far?
We're at 150 plus now. Yes. Yeah.
And how many people have actually passed the first test?
About three. About three were in balance. I would say about maybe 8 or 10 were semi-balanced, and then the rest have been out of balance.
So the ones that did pass the test, the company refunded them their money, correct?
Yes, yes. And I don't even tell that to them in the beginning, but then it's another extra like surprise to them. It's like, congratulations, you're in balance. And guess what? The company really wants to compensate you for the fact that you are doing, a lot of things right. People really like that. They really like that positive reinforcement.
Have you ever worked with another test that refunded the patient if they passed?
Never.
So
No.
at this point now, is it fully integrated into the clinic so that everybody there knows they're going to get tested and get on the balance oil, correct?
Yeah, most people will get tested. Yes. And we've done a lot of the repeat tests now. So we're at that 120 day and beyond. So I'm getting an opportunity to retest and really look at how the results have improved. And it's been interesting because some are not improving quite to the extent that I would expect them to. And so it's been an opportunity to have a real heart-to-heart conversation with people. And it really does allow us to say, like, what else is going on? Or there are other things that do you need more support with? And often it's that they're under a lot of stress, or that they've been traveling, or that they're off track, their oil is starting to build up, they're not taking it every day. So it really does circle back around to the conversation around compliance. And sometimes I do just ask the patient, like, if this was a prescription medication, like if this was your thyroid, or if this was like, would you be taking it more seriously? And being able to help people understand that this is as important to your health. So, and then when they get the results, and they're not as, you know, glamorous as they were hoping, then it's a little bit of a reality check. And I really appreciate that, because, and I think that they do as well. People want to know that what they're doing is working. And if it's not working quite as well, but it is still working, they're like, okay, there's more work to do. So those accountability and touch points are really valuable, and there aren't. And for the cost to do that second test, there's no cost. The cost to do a third test down the road, nobody seems to be concerned about that. And they are really invested in seeing this number improve.
For any new physicians that are listening or tuning in today, can you please reiterate what you just said, that the second test, when they stay on the oil, comes to the patient free of charge, correct?
It does. Yes. Yeah. So I try and emphasize that, as far as lab testing goes, this is a really, like, it's $300+ worth of lab testing for 155 or whatever your price is. As you know, I'm in Canada, so it's a little bit different. But and that if they happen to test imbalance in the beginning, that they will be reimbursed for that. So it's just such a win-win opportunity that it's really fun to be able to share this with people.
Okay, so the last two questions. Let's talk about some results. If you can tell us just a couple of stories, obviously no details, some case histories clinicians want to know. Is it effective? What are you seeing? And then finally, let's talk a little bit about your why at the end, right? You're a writer, you're a clinician, owner. I mean, you could build clinics all over the country if you wanted to. But let's talk at the end about your why you're so excited about this. But first, results from the patients. What are you seeing clinically?
Well, I'm going to talk about two that really stood out for me. And the first one was a patient of mine who I've worked with for many years. She's in her 70s, doing a lot of the right things, taking all doing all her recommendations. But her joints were hurting her, starting to bother her, not being able to exercise quite as much as she'd like to. And she's active. She's still wakeboarding with her kids at 70. Like, she's just a real dynamo. But her joints were starting to hurt. So I said, well, I think that we should revisit let's have a look at whether or not everything that we're doing is working. So I'd like you to take this blood test. And she said, initially she said, no, I don't want to take the test. I'm already taking oils. Is there any other reason why my joints might be hurting? So I said, well, there are, but I said, to be honest with you, I've worked with you for a long time and I just don't want to guess. Like, not when I have a test right in front of me that could help us know more about what's going on with you. So she agreed. And of course she got started on the oil before her results came back. And she contacted me literally the next week and she said, I don't know what it is, but like I'm forming sentences better than I've formed them in years. My joints are better than they've felt in a while. And she said, this is the only thing I've changed. So she said, I have to say, like, I am feeling better already in a week. So 3 weeks later, her results came back and she was in balance. So that one kind of blew me away because she had taken the oil and was already feeling better before we saw her results. But by then she was already feeling better. She knew she was going to get, reimbursed for that first test, and she was happy. So the takeaway from that was that even though her numbers were okay, there were still aspects of that result that weren't in balance. But most importantly, she felt better immediately, and her brain still continues. Like she said, I just feel like my brain is working so much better. The brain fog is gone. So the second person is a young lady. She was 12, and she came to me, her and her parents, and she was actually wearing a big parka, and she had the hood pulled up over her head, and her whole body was covered. And she couldn't make eye contact, and she just sat down, and her parents said, we're here for a second opinion. We've just come from the dermatologist who wants to do biologics with her. And I said, okay. So she took her jacket off so I could see her skin, and she was covered head to toe. It is the most severe case of eczema I've ever seen. And my heart just fell because I thought, I've seen a lot of skin conditions in my day. This one is probably the most severe. She was scratching herself to the point of bleeding every night. Like, her quality of life, she had no appetite. It was just really sad. And I looked at her parents and I said, I will make a couple of suggestions here, but I do want you to be open to, maybe to what the dermatologist is suggesting, because I just felt so bad for her. So I did a blood test with her, and we got her started on the oil, and I made one other suggestion, which was a probiotic. But in my heart, I thought, oh, this is, I don't want to give her anything that could possibly make her react. Like, we know that when a person is reactive, they can react to anything. So I sent her away and I said, I would like to touch base in 10 days. And they came back in 10 days. She took her jacket off. Her face had already cleared up significantly. She showed me her arms, her hands, like her skin was no longer cracking. She was sleeping through the night. She wasn't bleeding anymore. And that was after 10 days. So that one still gives me goosebumps because it was, and then when we did get her results back, she was 74-1. And she should have been, as you know, 3-1, 2-1. So yes, but again, we were starting to see results even before I got the results back. So those are kind of the extreme, and then lots of in between observations and feedback on the use of the oil. So I really have nothing but good things to say. I think people really appreciate the mild taste of it. They're not burping it. Um, they'll put their family members on it. So it really has become it's become a staple, and it really is. It's like a missing food group, right?
Just one quick follow-up on the first patient that passed that said that she was feeling it. With your background in the gut-brain connection, were you kind of not surprised with the polyphenols in there going down into the gut, even though her lipids were okay?
It was it was an eye opener for me because we have already done so much of that work with her. And that's why when she was still complaining about joint pain, I think as clinicians, we're looking for that next, like, okay, well, what's the next remedy? Where else do we need to be looking if she's got joint pain? Does she need more anti-inflammatories? Like, what does she need? And so in this case, it allowed me to just stop, take a step back and say, okay, but we don't know what this number is. So until we know what this number is, I'm not going to go any further. I'm not going to go down any other rabbit holes. And really, I think it does speak to the fact that sometimes when we think we've done all we can do, we haven't. And this is a really great reminder and a call to attention to providers that if you think you've maybe checked the box, you're doing the oils, you're doing the gut work, so there must be something more complicated. If you don't know what these numbers are, then you owe it to yourself and you owe it to your patients to at least be able to satisfy the fact that you understand what these numbers are and that you've checked this box. It's as valuable as knowing their vitamin D or their their cholesterol or their thyroid function. Like, this is just so foundational to know this.
So you got comfortable with the company, got comfortable with the products, integrated it into the clinic. You've tested, you said almost 150 people at this point. So sort of what's next? What's your why? And how does Zinzino fulfill some of the visions that you have about where you want to go globally as a health communicator and as a health provider?
Well, Stuart, I think that's probably the most important question, and it's how I resolved or sort of found a way to settle into this process with my patients is because I've been at this for 25 years, and I feel like at this stage of my life, I can help more people by, first of all, helping the people that are in front of me, but then educating them and educating their other healthcare providers about the importance of this mission. Because this is not just a health crisis in my community, this is a health crisis in the world. And we don't have to go far to look at the studies. I mean, it's becoming a very known fact that obesity and diabetes, like the chronic health conditions, are not getting better. And we see the data, we see the work that we do one-on-one, but this is the opportunity to create partnerships with other healthcare providers worldwide and help everybody help more people. So that's what I'd like to focus on going forward, is creating a team, and that team doesn't have to be under my roof. It can be under the roof of the world, where everybody can know this information and make a difference.
But for you personally, are you now even more engaged in getting other colleagues and people that you know because you can help more people that way? Is
Yeah.
this the direction of where it's headed for you?
It is, because I just feel like we don't know what we don't know, and so at the very least, I want the optometrist to know this. I want the dermatologist to know this. Like, this is solid science, and this is a very economical way to make a really big difference. But it's also a really viable vertical to integrate into an existing practice, because it's test based. So it speaks to the science geeks and those of us who love science and who love medicine, but it also it's kind of the low-hanging fruit in a practice where everybody needs oils. We know that, but we just need the right oils, and we need to know that we're doing it effectively.
So any last closing thoughts with any clinicians that, just want to know what's your takeaway message? What would you tell someone new that's listening to this, that's a clinician that's thinking about bringing Zinzino into their practice to help them feel more comfortable?
I think that I think Zinzino is doing something that is going to change the way supplementation is done for the world. And test-based nutrition, this is just the beginning. And I believe that that we have an opportunity to be leaders in the world of test-based nutrition. It's just a matter of time. And so I think if you can focus on where this is going, and the fact that the consumer is ready to have health autonomy, they're ready to be able to take their blood values into their own hands. They don't want to have to be dependent on a doctor. And ultimately, this will be the way of the future. So I see that. I see the writing on the wall. And I think anybody who has a growth mindset and is interested in being a part of the solution, I think this is a really great place to be for that.